In today's tutorial, I'll be demonstrating how you can create these 6 line style icon designs that range from simple to more complicated and progressing in that order. Before we get started though, if you want to learn more about how Inkscape works, be sure to check out my Inkscape Masterclass. It's a collection of over 80 videos where we go over all of the tools and features in Inkscape and I explain what they are and demonstrate how they work, kind of like how I'll do in this video. We even have a private community where you can ask questions and get help from me anytime you want. I'll have some information about that down below if you want to check that out. And now that that's out of the way, let's get started. So starting off with the first icon, we're going to create this simple map marker here. So let me move this out of the way and I'm going to zoom into 100%. And I'm going to grab my squares and rectangles tool over here. And I'm going to hold my control key and click and drag to draw a perfectly symmetrical square like that. And now I'm going to open up the fill and stroke menu by coming down here to this color stripe and double clicking on it. We want to make sure that we don't have any stroke applied to this object. So just come over here to the stroke paint tab and make sure that this is X'd out. And I'm going to bring the opacity of this down roughly in half. Then I'll come up here to the snaps and I will enable the snapping icon, that little magnet design right there. And I'm going to grab the circles and ellipses tool now and I'm going to snap the cursor to the top left of this square and then click and drag and then snap to the bottom right of that square. And we should now have a circle within the shape or in the same size as that square. So I'll grab my selection tool now. Let me turn off snapping. I'm going to right click this circle and go to duplicate. And I'll hold Control and Shift and I'm going to scale this down about that much. We want this to be about 1/3 the size. It doesn't have to be exact, you can eyeball it. And once that's done, let's select all of this. Click on it to get the rotation handles, and then hold your Control key and rotate this around a few steps until the corners are going vertically like that. And now we can just zoom in. We can go into the Shape Builder tool. Make sure you have the addition setting applied, and I'm just going to click and drag a line going through these two parts of the objects right there. And I'll go back to my selection tool, and there you can see we have a map marker design. Now this next part is optional, but I'm going to do this anyway because I think it adds a nice touch. I'm going to make this sharp corner rounded. So to do that, I will grab my direct selection tool, or the nodes tool rather, and I will come over here to this option that says Add Corners Live Path Effect and click on that. And now I can select just that node right there and I can take this round little knot and bring that in to make that a rounded corner. I think that just adds a nice little touch to it. Maybe not that rounded, a little less looks better. I'll zoom out, grab the selection tool. There we go. Let's convert this to a path by going to Path, Object to Path, and that'll finalize that corner down there. And we can bring the opacity back up to 100%. And I'm going to press 1 on the keyboard to zoom out to 100%. And I'm going to add a black stroke to this object. I'm first going to remove the fill color by clicking on this red X. And then I'm going to hold my Shift key and click black over here to add a stroke. And I'll come over here to the Stroke Paint tab, or the Stroke Style tab rather. And I'm going to change the width of this from 3.5 or whatever your value is. I'm just going to type in 5 and press enter. And I'll come up here and I make sure I have this setting disabled that says when scaling objects, scale stroke width by the same proportion. Make sure that's disabled. And then you can just hold Control and scale this down until you get a nice proportionate icon like that. And there we go. Just like that, we have a simple map marker icon. Now let's go over how to draw this basketball icon. Let me move this out of the way and I will press 1 on the keyboard to zoom out to 100%. And I'm going to grab my circles and ellipses tool and I'm going to hold my Control key and click and drag down and to the right so we have a nice round circle like that. And I'll grab my selection tool. What I'm going to do now is duplicate this by right-clicking it and going to duplicate. And I'm going to take this duplicate copy and I'm going to scale it up from the center. So to do that, I'm going to hold my Control key and my Shift key and then click and drag one of these handles to scale this up about that much. And then I will convert this to a path by going to Path and selecting Object to Path. And I'll come over here to my nodes tool and I'm going to click and drag over these two top nodes right there to select them. And then I'll come up here to the tool settings menu and I want to select this option up here that says break path at selected nodes, and I'll click on that. And now I want to break this apart by going to Path and selecting break apart. And I can grab my selection tool now. Let's click off of it to deselect everything. I'm going to hold my Control key and move this half of the line over here to the left. And then I'll take this half of the line or the circle and hold Control and move this over here to the right. And I'm just going to move these over and adjust them as needed until they're positioned nicely. Again, we want to make sure we hold Control the whole time we do this so that it maintains its position on the horizontal axis. And once you've done that, you can select all three of these objects and then go to the alignment menu by going to Object and selecting Align and Distribute. And where it says Relative to, I'm going to choose Last Selected. And I want to check this option right here where it says Distribute. I want to click on this one that says Distribute horizontally with even horizontal gaps. And that should make everything spaced apart evenly. So now I'm going to click off of that to deselect everything, and I'm going to draw a straight line going here vertically and then another one horizontally. So let me grab my Bezier pen, which is located over here. You can also access it by pressing the letter B on your keyboard. I'm going to choose this setting up here that says draw only straight lines, because we want to make sure we're only drawing straight lines for what we're going to do. And I'm going to bring the cursor up here, click once to add a point, hold Control, bring the line straight down, click again to add another point, and then press Enter on the keyboard to close the path. And let me grab my selection tool. I will go into the Fill and Stroke menu, and I want to change the size of this to 5 pixel stroke to match the rest of this. And then I will hold Shift and click on the circle so I have them both selected. Go back to Align to Distribute, and I'm going to center them up on the vertical and horizontal axis. And then I can click off of it to deselect everything. So now I'm going to select just this line right here. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to right click and go to Duplicate. And then I'm going to rotate it around 90 degrees by coming up here and clicking this icon that says Object Rotate 90 degrees. And now we have the lines of the basketball set. So now I'm going to click off of it now. I want to select everything except for this circle in the middle. So I'm going to click on this half circle right here, and then I'll hold Shift and click on this horizontal line, and then I'll hold Shift still and click on this vertical line, and then this half circle as well, holding Shift the whole time so we have them all selected. And now I want to merge them together. So I will go to Object and I will select Combine. Or no, I will go to Path and select Combine. And once those lines are combined, I'm going to click and drag over everything so that I have the circle and the combined lines selected. And I will go to Path and I will select Division. And that should break everything up into separate objects. And if I move this out of the way, you can see that's now its own piece. I'm going to press Control Z to put that back in there. And now we have a simple basketball icon. You can select it all and hold Control and scale it down until you get a nice proportionate line size like that. Now let's go over how you can draw this ellipse icon. So I'll move these out of the way, and I'm going to grab my circles and ellipses tool, and I will hold my Control key and click and drag until I have a perfectly round circle. For now, I want to get rid of this stroke, so I'm going to hold Shift and click on the red X down here, and I want to give this a solid fill, so I will click on black over here so it has a solid fill color. I'm going to grab my selection tool now, and I'm going to open up the Path Effects menu. So I'll come up here to Path, and I will go to Path Effects. And the path effect I want to apply is called tiling. So I'll open up this drop-down menu, and I'm looking for the option that says tiling. I'm going to select that. And from the options over here where it says rows, I want to set that to 2. And I want to set columns to 2 as well. And I'll press Enter to apply that. And now let me zoom in on this. I'm going to enter the Shape Builder tool, and I'm just going to click and drag a line going through these 3 segments right there to create that shape. And I'll go back to my selection tool, and now we have this peanut-like shape. So I'm going to click on this to get the rotation handles. I'll hold Control on my keyboard and just rotate this around until it's sitting upright. And now I can add my stroke. So I'm going to hold Shift and click on the color black to add the stroke, and I will remove the fill color by clicking on the red X down here. So what I will do next is I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to grab my nodes tool, and I'm going to select these 2 nodes right here, and I'm going to add a new node halfway between them by clicking this button up here that says Add New Node. When you hover your cursor over it, I'll click on that. And then I'll do the same thing over here. I want to select these 2 nodes, and I want to add a new one in there as well. So I'll click on that button to add a new node. And then I'm going to select this node right here, and then I will hold Shift and select this node right here. And I'm going to break the path at those 2 selected nodes. So I'll come over here to this button that says Break Nodes at Selected Path, and click on that. And now I will break apart the path by going to Path and selecting Break Apart. Grab the selection tool. Let's click off of it to deselect everything. I'm going to take this object right here and press Delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. I'm going to take this path right here, and I'm going to right click it and go to Duplicate. And I'm going to move this over. And I want to flip this horizontally by pressing the letter H on the keyboard. And I'm going to go to the Nodes tool again. And I'm just going to select this node right here and press Delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. And now I'm going to turn on snapping. I'm going to grab the selection tool and I'm going to snap these two ends together. And then I'm going to select both of these. I'll go into the nodes tool and I want to merge these two nodes together. So I'll click and drag over both of those nodes and I'll click this button up here that says join selected nodes. And now we have half of the top portion of the lip. So now let me right click this and go to duplicate. Press H on the keyboard to flip it horizontally and let's snap this together right there. Again, I'll select both of these. I'll go into my nodes tool, select both of these nodes right here, and we're going to merge them together as well. So I'm going to select the one that says join selected nodes, and now we have them merged together. So let me go back to my selection tool. We now have the top part of the lip drawn. So now I'm going to draw the middle portion. I'm going to grab the Bezier pen, which is located over here, and I'm going to snap to this node, click, and then snap to that node, and then click, and then press enter to close the path. Let me go to my selection tool. I will go to the fill and stroke menu, and I want to make the size of this 5 pixels, the stroke style width anyway. And I want to make this the same style as the other stroke as well. So I'm going to use a rounded cap and rounded corners. And then I'm going to grab my nodes tool. I'm going to click and drag over the two nodes, and I'm going to add a new node between them. And then I will add another node between those as well. So we have 3 new nodes in there. And I'm going to click and drag over these 3 nodes right here. And I'm going to make them auto smooth by clicking this button over here that says make selected nodes auto smooth. And then I'm going to click on just this node right here. Let's turn off snapping for a moment. And I'm going to hold control and click and drag this down like this. And then I'll take these 2 nodes over here and I'll bring them down a little bit as well, but not as much. And I'll take this node and adjust that as needed. And I'm just going by how I think it looks here. There's no exact measurement that I'm using. I'm just going to eyeball it. I think that looks pretty good right there. I'm going to click off of that to deselect everything. And now we have the top portion of the lip drawn. And to draw the bottom portion, we're just going to repeat that last step for the most part. So let me turn snapping back on. I'm going to grab my pen tool again, snap to this end, snap to that end, press enter to close the path. And I will make this 5 pixels, press enter, again using the same style, rounded cap, rounded join, grab the nodes tool, and this time I'm just going to add 1 new node in there. So I'm going to select both of those nodes and I'm going to add a new node, and I'm going to take just this node right here. We could turn off snapping again. I'm going to take just this node and I'm going to hold control and click and drag this down here about that far. And then I'm going to click on this button up here that says make selected nodes symmetric. And now we could take this handle and pull this out or in as needed. Just make sure to hold control while you do that so it keeps it on the horizontal axis. And I'll bring it out about that far. And you can bring it up or down depending on your own personal preference. And once you're finished, you can go back to your selection tool and you can select all of this and scale this down. We have just created those lip icons. Now let's go over how to draw this umbrella icon. So let me zoom back out and I'll move this off the page. I'm going to grab my circles and ellipses tool and I will hold the control key and click and drag to draw a perfectly round circle. And for now I'm going to turn off the stroke by holding shift and clicking the red X down here, and then I will apply a black fill. And I want to make the opacity of this about 50%. So I'll come down here to opacity and drop this down in half. You can access this in the fill and stroke menu if you don't have it open already. And I'm going to grab my selection tool and I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to turn on snapping, and I'm going to right click this and go to duplicate, and I'll just snap this duplicate copy to the right of this one, and I'll do that again. I'll right click this and go to duplicate, and I'll snap this one to the right of that one. And now I'm going to take this circle right here, I'll right click that and go to duplicate, and I'll hold control and shift and scale this out until it snaps to the edges of the 3 circles like that. In fact, let me move this out of the way from those other ones real quick. There we go. Now I'm going to take this top circle and I want to elongate this a little bit. So I'm going to hold my shift key and I'm going to grab this bottom handle right here, and make sure you're holding shift while you do this so that you only scale the vertical dimension. And I'm going to scale this up to elongate a little bit. That looks pretty good. And then I'll take this middle circle and I'll duplicate it again. Or you know what, I'll have to lower this to the bottom so that I can select it. So click this button over here that says lower selection to the bottom, and then I can select this middle circle and I can right click it and go to duplicate. And for this one, I'm going to hold shift and grab this node again, and I'm going to bring this one out to about here until it snaps to the edge of the larger ellipse. And once that's done, we can just select all of these objects, go into the Shape Builder tool, and just click on each of these 3 top objects individually. Click once on each of them to make them 3 separate shapes, and then we can go back to the Selection tool, and now we have the top portion of the umbrella shape. So let me bring the opacity of that up to 100%. I'm going to remove the fill color, and then I will hold shift and click on the black color to make this have a black stroke. And again, we want a 5-point stroke, we want rounded caps, rounded join. That all looks good. I'm going to hold control and scale this down so that the lines become a little thicker in proportion to the rest of the shape. And now we just have to draw the handle of the umbrella. So to do that, I'm going to grab the Squares and Rectangles tool, click and drag to draw an elongated rectangle like that. And I'm going to take this node and bring that all the way down like that so we have perfectly rounded ends as you see here. And now we'll convert this to a path by going to Path and selecting Object to Path. And I will go into my Nodes tool, and I want to select this node right here, and then hold shift and select this node right here, and then break the path at those 2 points. So I'll come up here to the Nodes tool settings, and I'll click on this button right here that says Break Path at Selected Nodes. And then I will break apart the path by going to Path and selecting Break Apart. And then I'll grab my Selection tool, click off of it to deselect, and we can just get rid of that piece by pressing Delete on the keyboard. And I can just take this object and move that in there like that. Now, your handle may be a little too big in proportion to the rest of the umbrella. If that's the case, just move it out of the way, hold control and scale it down, or scale it up if needed if it's not big enough. So I'm going to scale mine down because in my case it was a little too big. And then I'll snap that in there. But now I need this handle to be a little longer, so I'll just go back into my Nodes tool, select these nodes right here, and hold control and bring them all down like that. And now we have nice proportions there. So let me zoom out, select everything, hold control and scale it down as needed. And there we go. Now we have a simple little line style umbrella icon. Now let's go over how to make these wavy lines. So I'll move this out of the way, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'll click and drag to draw a rectangle. I want to make sure I don't have any rounded corners, so I'll come up here and click on this button that says Make Corners Sharp. And I'm going to remove the stroke by holding shift and clicking on the red X, and I will apply a black fill by clicking on black. And I want to make this 300 by 100 pixels. So I'll grab my Selection tool. I'll come up here to where it says width and height, or W and H. Make sure you have this lock turned off. And I'm going to make this 300, and then I'll press tab to skip over to height and make that 100 and press enter. And now we have a 300 by 100 rectangle. Let me bring the opacity of this down in half. I'm going to grab my Circles and Ellipses tool now, and I will hold Control and Shift and click and drag to draw a circle. And I want to make this double the height of this rectangle, which is 100 pixels. So I want this to be 200 pixels. I'll come over here to the lock icon, turn that on, and I want to change the width of this to 200. And there we go. Now we have a 200 pixel circle. And I'm going to snap this right to the bottom center of the previous rectangle. Make sure you have your snaps turned on if you don't already. It's this icon up here. And again, we want to snap that right into the center like that. And now I'm going to take this circle, I'm going to duplicate it by right-clicking it and going to duplicate. And I want to make this one half the size, which would be 100 pixels. So I'll come back up here and I'll type in 100, press enter. And then I want to hold shift, click on this circle right here, and I'll come over here to my alignment menu, and I want to make sure you have last selected chosen from this drop down. I want to make sure I have align to top edges. I'm going to click on that, and then I'll come over here and select align right edges, and that right there is what we're looking for. So let me click and drag over all of these objects to select them, and I will go into my Shape Builder tool, and I'll click and drag a line going through these parts of the shapes right there so that we have this wave-like shape. That right there is what we're looking for. I'll go back to my Selection tool, and I'm going to grab the Nodes tool, and now I'm going to click on this button up here that says Add Corners Live Path Effect, and I'm going to select this node right here and just take this round knot and bring this all the way out that far so that it rounds that corner like that. And then we can click on this button up here that says Object to Path, and there we go. So let me grab my Selection tool now. I'm going to go back to the Fill and Stroke menu, bring the opacity up to 100%, And I'm going to apply the stroke now. I'll hold shift and click on the black color and then click on the red X to remove the fill. And now I'm going to go back to my nodes tool and I want to select this node right here and then hold shift and select this node right there. And with both of those nodes selected, I will break the path at those nodes. So I'm going to click on this button over here that says break path at selected nodes. And I will break the path apart now by going to path and selecting break apart. I'll grab my selection tool. Let's click off the deselect, take this object, get rid of it by pressing delete on the keyboard. And now I can duplicate this object. So you could right click it and go to duplicate, or you can just press Control D or Command D if you're on Mac, and then just snap them together right there. And I'll do the same thing, Command D or Control D, snap them together right there. And I'm going to select all of these three objects now, and I want to merge them together. So to do that, I will go into my nodes tool. I'll select these two nodes right here first, and I'm going to choose this option that says join selected nodes. And I'll do the same thing over here. Select these two nodes. We will go to join selected nodes, and there we go. So now let's go back to the selection tool. Let's turn off the snapping option, and I'm going to right click this and go to duplicate. Hold Control, click and drag it down, or again, Control D, duplicate another one, bring this down here like that. And now I'm going to select all three of these, go back to the Align and Distribute menu, and in the Distribute section, we are looking for this option right here that says Distribute Vertically with Even Vertical Gaps. And if you click on that, they will now be spaced apart evenly. You can click off it to deselect everything. And now I'm going to hold Control and just take this middle one and move this out a little bit like that. And there we go. Now we have our wavy lines icon. If you want, you could select them all, scale them down like that until you get a nice size stroke in proportion to the rest of it. And there we go. And for the final lesson in this tutorial, we will go over how to make this acoustic guitar. So let's get started on that. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to click and drag to draw a rectangle. And I want to remove the stroke by holding shift and clicking the red X down here. And I want to give this a solid fill color of black. And I want to bring the opacity of this down in half. So let me come back over here to my fill and stroke menu and bring this down roughly in half. And I'll come over here to my selection tool. Let's disable the lock icon between the width and the height if you have it enabled. And I want to change the width and the height to 300 by 350. So let me type in 300. I'll press tab to skip over to the height. And then I'll type in 350 and press enter. And now we have a 300 by 350 rectangle. So let's come over here to the rectangle, or to the nodes tool. And let's convert this to a path by going to path and selecting object to path. And I'm going to select these two nodes up here. And I'm going to turn on this option up here that says show transformation handles for selected nodes. And once you do that, you'll have these transformation handles. I'm going to hold Control and Shift and scale this in roughly about that much. And then I'm going to select these two nodes right here, and I'm going to add a new node between them by clicking on this button up here that says Insert New Node into Path. And I'll do the same thing over here on the right-hand side. I'll select these two nodes, and I will add a new node in there as well. Now I want to select these two nodes in the middle, and I'll hold Control and Shift and scale this in like that. And I'll bring these two nodes up a little bit like this. Make sure to hold Control when you do this so it locks it onto the horizontal axis. And once you do that, let's come up here and click on this button that says Add Corners Live Path Effect. And now we can take these two nodes up here and take this round knot and round the top portion of the rectangle like that. I'm paying attention to these two triangles right here. I don't want them completely touching, but I'm going to bring them about that far apart. And then I'll take these two down here and I'll bring these in about this far. Again, using these two triangles down here, you don't want them touching, not yet anyway. About that far apart looks pretty good. And then I'll take these two nodes right here, and I'm going to round them ever so slightly. If you round them too much, you're going to lose a lot of that inward dent, I guess you can call it, that inward swoop. I want to make them shorter though, so that we end up with something like that right there. And you could even hold Control and Shift and scale these in a little bit afterwards to really accentuate that effect. And I'll do the same thing over here. Let me take this and adjust this as needed. And you can scale these out using Control and Shift and click and dragging these nodes over here if you really want to get a better effect there. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'll scale this in. And those proportions look pretty good. So now I'm going to grab my selection tool And I'm going to hold the Shift key and grab this top arrow and bring that down a little bit, just to collapse this down a little bit like that. And now we have a proper guitar shape. So let me finalize that by going to Path and selecting Object to Path. I'm going to place a circle here in the middle, so let me grab my Circles and Ellipses tool, and I'll hold Control and Shift and just click and drag to draw a perfectly round circle like that. And I'll place this right about there. I'm going to make this a little smaller, in fact. And then I'll select both of these. Let's go to the Align to Distribute menu and make sure we have them centered on the vertical axis. And then click off of that to deselect everything. Now I'm going to grab the Rectangle tool, click and drag to draw a rectangle going through the middle of the guitar body like that. And I'll move this in about that far. I'm going to hold Shift, click on this object, and then just center it vertically like that. And now I'm going to draw another rectangle up top over here, like that. And I want to center that as well. I'll hold Shift, and I will select Center on Vertical Axis. And if you need to change the size of this at any point, you could just click on this and then just hold Shift and move this dimension in if needed, move that dimension out if needed, and just adjust it as you see fit. I'll bring this up to about here. Maybe I'll make this a little taller. Bring that up a little further as well. And that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll make this a little wider. Again, holding Shift while you do this. If you don't hold Shift, you're only going to scale one side. If you hold Shift, you scale both sides at the same time so you don't lose that center on the vertical axis. And now I'm going to hold Shift and select both of these rectangles, and I'm going to unify them together by going to Path and selecting Union. And now I'm going to grab my Nodes tool. Let's take these two inner nodes right here, and I'm going to hold Control and bring them down like that. And then I will deselect that by clicking off of it. Let's come up here and select the Add Corners Live Path effect. I'll take these two nodes right here and I will round them so we have a nice fluid transition between these two rectangles. And then I'll grab these four nodes up here and I will round them as well. I'll round them about that much. And once you're done, you can convert that to a path as well by clicking this button up here that says Object to Path. And in my example here, I think this is a little too high, so I'm going to take these nodes and hold Control and scale them down a little bit. So now let's go to the Selection tool. Let's click off it to deselect everything. Let's select all three of these objects here, and I'm going to go to Path, and I'm going to select Flatten. And what that's going to do is it's going to separate it into three objects. I could take this object and press Delete to get rid of it. And if I move this out of the way, you can see what it did there. It kind of created a hole where that rectangle was located. Let me press Command Z to put that back. What I want to do now is select all of these, or both of these objects, remove the black fill, add a black stroke by holding Shift and clicking on the color black. And we'll come over here to the Fill and Stroke menu. I'm going to make this stroke 5 pixels. And I'm going to make sure I have a rounded join and a rounded cap. Everything's looking good there. And now it's going to add a couple of details. Let me first scale this down by holding Control and clicking and dragging. I'm going to add a couple of details. I'll put a little line down here, and I'll put a couple of lines at the edges here. So let me grab the pen tool, click to add a point, hold Control, bring the line straight across, press Enter to close the path, and let's make this the same size. It'll be 5 pixels. We want rounded caps, rounded join, and I'll hold Shift, click on the guitar body, and then just center it vertically using the Align to Distribute menu. And up here, I'm just going to take this line, I'm going to press Control D to make a copy of it, and I'll bring this line up here. Let's turn on snapping now. I can snap this line to the edge like that, and I'll grab my Nodes tool and just hold Control and bring that in like that. So it's about that far. And I'm going to duplicate that by pressing Control D. That would be Command D if you're on Mac. And bring that one down there. And I'll just duplicate both of these, pressing Control D. I'll hold Control, bring these ones straight across like that. And there we go. Just like that, we have created our little guitar icon. So that should do it for today's tutorial. That is how you can go about building these icons using nothing but strokes in Inkscape. If you found this lesson useful, then consider checking out my Inkscape Masterclass. It's a collection of over 60 videos where I go over all of the tools and features in Inkscape, and I explain what they are and demonstrate how they work. Kind of like how I did in this video. We even have a private community where you can ask questions and get help from me anytime you want. And best of all, there's no monthly membership fees. You just pay $17 one time and you're in for life. I'll have some information about that down below if you want to check that out. As always, thanks for watching.